The pink-haired girl muttered in the direction the family of three had departed, her gaze then settling on the handsome boy standing by himself. She rolled her eyes playfully, tugged on the long-haired girl's arm, and sauntered towards him. "Hey handsome, care to add me as a friend?" With a grin, the pink-haired girl held out her mobile phone. The handsome boy hesitated for a split second, then gave a slight nod. All right, soon enough, the two had connected on social media, and even the long-haired girl had added him as well. Ling, the pink-haired girl sounded out the name on her phone with a smile. Now that's a domineering name. Okay, handsome, I'll let you be. See you around. As the pink-haired girl left, she mumbled to her friend, "You added him too? I figured this trip would be a bore, but it looks like it's about to get interesting." She was clearly delighted to have made Ling's acquaintance. Ling simply nodded to them both and watched as they walked away. The instant the pink-haired girl and the girl with long hair were gone, the smile on Ling's face gradually faded away. His eyes grew progressively sharper, his entire temperament shifting in a matter of breaths from harmless and approachable to cold and dangerously unpredictable. Interesting. I can't believe I'd run into a spiritual teacher here. Ling glanced toward the direction the middle-aged couple and their daughter had left. Ling's original destination on this trip was the deep recesses of Ox Mountain. Because he was in an unfamiliar place, it would have been inconvenient to go alone, so he had simply registered for a tour group heading to the nation. That's what led to the previous scene. To Ling's surprise, there were two official warriors and a second-level spiritual teacher hidden within this small tour group of just 30 people, far from the weakest bunch you'd expect. The two girls who just befriended him, the one with pink hair is named Jing Dandan, and the one with long straight hair is called Lin Zishan. What's more, Lin Zishan is a second-level warrior, and the little girl in the red dress with her father, the elegant middle-aged man, is a rare second-level spiritual teacher, but he shouldn't have been able to uncover my true identity. At most, he can only sense that I practice martial arts. Ling was still very confident about this. Having already formed the prototype of the master's will, Ling's spiritual power was incredibly concentrated, having collapsed into the golden sun at the core of his brain. As long as he doesn't actively release it, ordinary people would find it impossible to discover how strong his mental power truly is, a necessary deception on the path as he becomes strongest. Whatever their purpose is for coming to Oxhead Mountain, it doesn't matter as long as it doesn't interfere with mine. But if it does, Ling mused with chilling calm, then they can only be crushed. With that, Ling dragged his suitcase and started walking in the direction of the cottage. Simultaneously, on a highway hundreds of kilometers from Sinan village, a stretched limousine was speeding along. Inside the lavish carriage, a middle-aged man in a purple-plaid casual suit sat leisurely in the back seat. The middle-aged man possessed snow-white skin, a cold aura, and a pair of eyes that were an eerie lavender, lending his otherwise ordinary facial features a touch of sinister charm. In front of him, a bottle of red wine was suspended in the air, pouring its contents slowly into a wine glass. The middle-aged man lifted the glass and swirled it gently, inhaling the aroma that wafted from it, and said, "Well, have you found?" He finally located Tang Mon's whereabouts, only then noticing a man kneeling dutifully before him. This subordinate was a burly man, his powerful muscles straining against the fabric of his suit as he reported, "We've found him. He's at Oxhead Mountain. Specifically, in Zoming City. Tang Mon has his wife and daughter with him, and it appears they're planning to venture deep into the mountains," the brawny man continued. He spoke with a deeply respectful tone, but the middle-aged man merely frowned and remarked, "So, Tang Mon has some sense after all. If he truly burrows into those deep mountains and ancient forests, refusing to emerge, my options become severely limited." "Do not worry, my lord," the subordinate quickly reassured him. "We have assets watching their every move. Even if he intends to live like a savage, I promise we will find him. We'll pinpoint the exact cave he's nesting in," the brawny man declared with unwavering confidence, earning an admiring glance from his master. The middle-aged man nodded in approval. "Well done. For now, just maintain surveillance. Once I arrive at Oxhead Mountain, I will handle the matter personally." Although Tang Mon is a minor figure, he is still a second-level spiritual teacher, after all. My two fourth-level warriors are among the weakest I have. They are simply not his match. Tang Mon, you can only blame yourself for this cruelty. The man savored a sip from his wine glass, musing to himself, "If I let you live after such an offense, others will begin to think that Wei Jing is easy to challenge. Soon, everyone will try to step on me, hindering my path as I become the strongest in this world." He then extended a hand toward a young girl seated beside him, who listlessly raised her head, revealing vacant, red-rimmed eyes. She was clearly under some form of mental domination. Then, something utterly grotesque began to happen as a purple fluid seeped from her eyes. The bizarre liquid began to stream from every pore on her face, flowing as if guided by an unseen force until it collected in the glass. Held by the middle-aged man, he inhaled its aroma deeply and whispered, "Ah," tinged with the innocent feelings of first love. "It carries the unique essence of a woman in her 20s. All the while, the girl remained in a daze, completely unable to offer any resistance. It was clear the man was saying, "Tang Mon, so you've brought your daughter along? It seems my collection is about to gain another addition." A sinister smile stretched across the man's face as he finished his sentence. At that moment, the couple with their little girl booked a room. As they stepped inside, the little girl began to run about in sheer excitement. "Run slowly now, the floor is uneven. Be careful not to fall," the elegant middle-aged woman cautioned, following closely behind the child with a look of concern. Beside her, the refined middle-aged man walked into the room, a strange light flashing in his eyes. An invisible force radiated outwards, instantly blanketing the entire room. The energy then enveloped the whole building, analyzing every single part of it. After a short while, the light in the man's eyes vanished and he stated, "There's no surveillance and no tracker. This room is completely clean." The beautiful woman gently coaxed the little girl into bed, then turned her head and said softly, "You are being far too cautious. Even if Weijing is powerful and Baoding, can his reach truly extend to this Ox Head Mountain? When it comes to you and Nan Nan, there is no such thing as being too careful," the elegant man replied solemnly. "Don't forget that we are running for our lives." Wo Xiang is an established, third-level spiritual master, known by the nickname, the Purple-Eyed Demon Spider. If you cross him, he will seek revenge. I pray we can escape his investigation this time, as he hunts those he deems the weakest. As long as we remain hidden in Senin village for a year and a half, we should be fine, even if he does catch up to us. With your father around, the two of us can join forces, and we might just be able to handle him. Of course, that is the worst possible outcome. I truly hope our journey is smooth and safe." The beautiful woman sighed softly and added, "I haven't seen my father in such a long time, and I have no idea how he is." The elegant man's eyes softened, and he stepped forward to hug the beautiful woman gently. Comforting her softly, "Your father's martial arts cultivation is quite strong. He is still a second-level peak spiritual teacher. Perhaps he is at the third level by now, and he is in his prime. What could be wrong? Don't you worry. I will absolutely not allow you and Nan Nan to be harmed. I'll become the strongest to protect you." The beautiful woman nodded and leaned lightly on the elegant man's chest, feeling a bit more at ease. Not far away, the little girl in a red dress was standing on the bed, holding a plastic ball and giggling. Luing entered the homestay room the travel agency had arranged for him and walked straight toward the window. As Luing looked out, he released his psychic energy, scanning the entire area. His psychic power was so potent that it easily covered the whole village. Luing analyzed each and every person in the village, looking for anyone suspicious who could be a threat to his mineral mining activities on Oxhead Mountain. As he scanned the whole area, he only noticed one other man using surveillance, who was focused on someone else. Apart from that individual, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But since he isn't bothering me, I will just leave him be. Luing spoke to himself. He tidied up a little and took a glass vial from his pocket. The bottle contained about a dozen small pills. Luing poured out one pill onto his hand. He then tossed it into his mouth, feeling the nourishing marrow pill instantly dissolve. His body. It transformed into a torrent of heat that surged through his limbs and bones as he began to practice the movements of the stellar body refinement technique. This intense process continued until Luing paused, sensing his chi and blood value had significantly increased. The progress of his immortal golden body's muscles and bones had also leaped forward, and a smile of deep satisfaction graced Luing's face. With the aid of these medicinal pills, his path as he becomes strongest is indeed much faster. He estimated that within 2 months, he would be able to fully complete the first stage of cultivation for the immortal golden body, generate internal energy, and officially ascend into the ranks of 4th-level warriors. Luing then went into the bathroom for a shower. Afterward, he picked up his phone to check the farewell messages he'd sent to his family, all of which had been answered. His father, Luda, and his mother, Xuan, had replied as usual, telling him to be cautious while out alone, to pay attention to changing his clothes, and to be careful not to get an upset stomach. In their eyes, he, a 3rd-level warrior, was still just a child. His younger sister, Luchin, her, simply replied, "You've run off to play again, haven't you?" With a smile still on his face, Luing replied with a smug emoji. "Sister Yuan is also back at school today and wants to treat you to dinner." Lu Qinghe responded in seconds. "Be honest, are you two actually dating now?" Luing considered this for a moment and replied, his tone shifting to one of mock fury. "Concentrate on your own martial arts and stay out of other people's business. Remember to take those tonics I left for you every single day. If your blood value hasn't surpassed 1.3 by the time I get back, you'll have a harsh lesson to learn. The world." After a moment of quiet reflection, Luing shook his head, clearing his thoughts before departing. He now possessed 20 bottles of spiritual muscle-strengthening blood soup, not to mention the exotic beast meat stocked in his refrigerator at home. In terms of cultivation resources, Luing was now nearly on par with the children of wealthy families. All he needed was a bit more effort. With a little more hard work, his blood value was certain to surpass 1.3. After mapping out his plan for tomorrow, Luing began his training. He started by practicing the stellar body refinement technique, pushing himself until the very last trace of his physical strength was completely exhausted. Only after the stellar body refinement technique had drained him did he enter the dream space, eager to test the results of his recent training. Having comprehended the master technique of 10 suns in the same sky and formed the prototype of a master's will, his confidence was soaring. Luing's self-assurance had inflated considerably, allowing him to stride through the dream space effortlessly, cutting down zombie after zombie. After forming his martial master force field, nothing seemed capable of harming him. He truly felt he was on the path that times becomes strongest asterisk. He had become an unstoppable force, unleashing fiery blasts in every direction that incinerated all the zombies in his path. Until now, Luing's exploration of the dream space had been nothing but a series of triumphant victories. He had entered the advanced zones several times, using his composure to easily outmaneuver the powerful monsters within. He toyed with them as if they were in the palm of his hand, so much so that he failed to notice his own growing arrogance. Defeating the master-level zombie Shi Xing and acquiring his martial arts treasure had pushed this overconfidence to its absolute peak. As Ling ventured deeper into the central area, he suddenly felt a chilling aura permeate his surroundings. Something plummeted from the sky and crashed down directly in front of him, and the sheer force of its landing was immense. An intense spiritual pressure erupted from the impact's site, instantly freezing the entire area solid. Ling was utterly baffled. He stood there dazed, staring ahead as he tried to process the situation, feeling an overwhelming presence emanating from that direction. The crater was completely covered in shimmering ice crystals, located just 2 streets away from where he found Grandmaster Shi Xing. A few moments later, a figure emerged from the ice. It was a female zombie, with a body that looked almost perfectly human. However, one side of her face was unmistakably that of a zombie, and with a mere wave of her hand, she unleashed a gust of frigid air. She was clad in Grandmaster battle armor similar to Shi Xing's and clutched a broken spear in her hand. Her proportions were flawless, like a Valkyrie from ancient mythology, and Ling instantly realized he had stumbled into the territory of another. He had found another martial master level zombie, but this one was entirely different from Shi Xing. This Valkyrie Grandmaster was on another level. The sheer combat consciousness remaining within her body was simply overwhelming. The moment Ling came within 100 meters, he was spotted. Before he could even register what happened, she vanished from his sight in a flash. Countless red exclamation marks lit up all around Ling's perception, accompanied by a rapid and piercing mental alarm. By the time he managed to release his own mental power to track her, the Valkyrie Grandmaster had already closed the distance. She was now less than 5 meters in front of him, and Ling was frozen to the spot, feeling like the time's weakest creature in existence. Before he could even react, the Valkyrie Grandmaster struck him down in an instant. In his final moment, Ling's vision was filled with her majestic and terrifying form. Of him. As his form transformed into a brilliant and majestic glacier. The power was overwhelming. Ling was profoundly shaken as his world was utterly overturned. The consequence of this utter defeat was Ling's instantaneous expulsion from the dream space, akin to being violently jolted awake from a harrowing nightmare, leaving him flustered with a splitting headache. The phantom sensation of his body being torn asunder was terrifyingly real to Ling. He was jolted awake from the nightmare, the ghostly feeling of his body being ripped apart still lingering. Thank goodness it was just a dream, he muttered. I only perished within the dream space. Otherwise, he would have suffered a true death countless times under that monstrous zombie's relentless onslaught. Ling had summoned every ounce of his strength to resist, but in that moment he felt like the weakest challenger, unable to even perceive the zombie's movements. How could he possibly defend? In a flash, the zombie materialized before him, ready to deliver the final, annihilating blow. Up until this point, Ling's journey through the dream space had been deceptively smooth. After entering the advanced zones several times, he had grown accustomed to using his sharp wit and composure to outmaneuver the less sophisticated advanced monsters, twisting them around his finger with such ease that he failed to realize it himself. Subconsciously, an insidious arrogance had taken root, especially after grinding down the master-level zombie, Sure Shining, and acquiring its martial arts treasure had pushed his hubris to a peak. He now understood the dream space is not the personal playground he had imagined. In this wasteland, born from the ashes of civilization, only trials of blood and fire can forge the one who becomes strongest, a true savior. At that moment, Ling experienced a profound enlightenment, and his mindset returned to its original state of calm focus. The negative influence of his rapid power growth over the past 3 months simply vanished. In this newfound clarity, Ling began his post-mortem analysis. The Valkyrie Grandmaster's power was undeniable, and its combat instincts were leagues beyond those of Sure Shining. This had to be a Grandmaster of a higher caliber, perhaps even an 8th-level Grandmaster. Ling then recalled the brilliant glacier formed by the spear's thrust. It must have been the manifestation of the Grandmaster's martial will, the Valkyrie Grandmaster's ultimate skill. This humbling defeat reminded Ling that he was still just a frail boy, journeying through the wilderness, trembling and treading on thin ice, desperately searching for a single ray of light in an endless black fog. If I hadn't been so arrogant, he mused, at my peak, with full control of my boxing techniques and master skills, it might not be entirely impossible to contend with the Valkyrie Grandmaster. But then, Ling shook his head with a self-deprecating laugh, the memory of the shock from his dream death still fresh. His face was pale as he settled into a lotus position. Why not go back and give it another try? Ling considered challenging the master zombie with his palm arts, but a sharp pain lanced through his skull the moment he attempted to re-enter the dream space. It appeared to be on a cooldown timer, one that would likely shorten as his own spiritual power recovered. Just as Ling was contemplating his next move, his phone buzzed to life. It was Xing Dandan, the girl he had just added earlier that day, who had sent him a flood of messages. Little brother, are you back in your room? I'm an official warrior now, so I can protect you. Followed by, little brother, it's dinner time. Want to grab a bite together? And then, brother, why aren't you answering me? Do you ever even look at your phone? Ling just stared at the screen in silence for a few moments, suddenly filled with regret for adding her as a contact. Without a word of reply, he simply turned off the phone. After that ordeal, Ling realized he was famished. He made his way down to the dining hall on the first floor, where he found a clean table. After changing into a fresh set of clothes, Ling emerged from his room and walked downstairs, where he noticed several of the older folks from his tour group. They were also heading down, but unlike him, they had already finished their dinner and were returning to their rooms to pack. They were preparing for a nighttime visit to the village. He had assumed he was the only one eating so late, but was surprised to see the little girl's family, as well as the two young women, Jing Dandan and Yang Zishan, still seated in the dining hall. The moment Luing appeared, he immediately caught their attention. "Luing, over here!" Xing Dandan called out, jumping to her feet. She waved at him energetically, completely ignoring the stares of others. The little girl with her parents also waved excitedly in Luing's direction. Luing offered a polite wave in return. Tang Mon, sitting with the family, shot a casual glance at Luing, who had become the center of attention. The little girl's father smiled warmly at Luing and gave a slight nod. Luing quietly found a nearby seat and settled in, a short distance from the little girl's family. He picked up the menu on the table and began to look over the options. "Why are you sitting all alone? It's much livelier with more people," Xing Dandan insisted, pulling a helpless Lindsay Shan along as she sat down beside Luing. Luing asked, puzzled, "Haven't you two eaten yet?" Xing Dandan replied, "Not a bite." At the exact same time, however, her friend stated, "We already ate." The two conflicting answers hung in the air. Xing Dandan shot a fierce glare at Lindsay Shan. She then forced a smile to smooth things over, saying, "I just wasn't hungry earlier. I couldn't even touch the food I ordered. But now I'm suddenly starving, so this is perfect timing to eat with you. I think it's a beautiful and delicious coincidence." "The drinker's true intention is never the wine," Lindsay Shan muttered slowly. Xing Dandan acted as if she didn't exist and focused solely on Luing. I heard people say the dishes here are amazing. Do you want to try some meanwhile?" The little girl was looking eagerly at Luing's table. She tilted her head up at the middle-aged couple and asked, "Daddy, can I go eat with the big brother?" "But isn't it the same as eating right here?" the beautiful woman asked, gently stroking the little girl's hair. The little girl replied with perfect childhood logic, "Nan thinks the food will be yummier if I sit next to the big brother." The beautiful woman glanced at her husband, who simply smiled and said, "Let her go. She won't be leaving our sight. What is there to worry about?" The little girl stood up excitedly. Seeing her husband's approval, the beautiful woman didn't argue further, only instructing, "Be on your best behavior when you go over. Don't disturb the big brother and sisters while they eat." The little girl picked up her plate and quickly scampered toward Luing's table. Seeing that her daughter had successfully joined them, the beautiful woman's expression relaxed slightly. She turned her head and complained to the elegant man, "Really? Why did you let her go to a table of strangers?" The elegant man chuckled softly and said, "You always tell me I'm too cautious, but I think you're being the overly cautious one now. Nan likes that young man, so let her be. I've already scanned the entire area. There are only ordinary tourists here. That young man has a good character, his eyes are pure, and he won't be a bad person. He is only a high school student, after all. Even if he has practiced martial arts for a few years, he's a far cry from the kind of person who becomes strongest. His strength is so negligible, he's probably the weakest person in this room. As long as he is within my sight, his life could be snuffed out with a single thought." His expression was perfectly calm, and his words were filled with an unshakable confidence. The beautiful woman beside him was utterly convinced of his power. She knew that her husband was a formidable second-level spiritual teacher. Even while fleeing, they were far beyond what ordinary warriors could handle. "It's the other two," the elegant man commented, his eyes settling on Lindsay Shan with a hint of curiosity. "The one with long hair seems to have sensed that my body isn't normal, but she is exceptionally smart, very sharp. She must realize the other one is among the weakest, a simple-minded type with only average strength. He's merely a first-level warrior. In any case, they are just common folk who I can easily deal with." Nan, you don't need to concern yourself," the elegant man assured her, patting the beautiful woman's hand gently. "I'm still thinking about whether I should buy your father a gift for our visit tomorrow." The beautiful woman nodded, her worries completely dispelled. "All right. Little brother, are you really going to eat that much?" Xing Dandan stared at Luing's table, piled high with food, her eyes wide with astonishment. "My appetite has been larger these days," Luing responded casually, pushing some meat buns aside. He placed them in front of Nan and then said gently to the girl beside him, "Should we see who can finish first?" "Okay, let's race to see who eats first." Nan's spirit soared, and she began to earnestly tackle the bun in her hands. Meanwhile, Luing started to devour the food with the monstrous speed he was accustomed to. Lindsay Shan's gaze swept over the feast on the table, and her expression grew a little colder as she looked at Luing. Only people from average families, those who had yet to become fully fledged warriors, would need to eat so much in a single meal. After a martial artist advances past the initial levels, they typically rely on tonics to supplement the energy needed for their daily practice. Those without the means would at least choose higher quality ingredients rather than consuming massive quantities of food. For example, Xing Dandan carried synthetic, compressed jerky with her. A first-level martial artist would be full after eating just a few pieces. Consuming that much regular food would only cause problems for a trained body. However, thinking that the boy named Luing was still very young, Lindsay Shan felt a sense of relief, attributing his actions to his youth. Xing Dandan, however, didn't seem to mind Luing's eating habits in the slightest. True to her word, she began eating right alongside him. Watching the three of them eat so heartily made Lindsay Shan a bit hungry herself. If only I could eat more without having to consider my ladylike image, I'll just forget about it. After staring at the three of them for a while, Lindsay Shan couldn't help but sigh in her heart. I have to admit one thing though. This boy named Ling is absolutely impeccable physically, and his appearance is truly 1 in 1,000. His looks, physique, and temperament are all exceptional. Even when he eats so much and so quickly, it's still somehow pleasing to watch. What a pity that good looks are all he has, Lindsay Shan murmured to herself. He has the kind of frame that becomes strongest, but it's a shame it's all just for show. The thought couldn't help but bring her scumbag ex-boyfriend to mind once more. Although he was unattractive and his character was scum, in terms of martial arts, his talent was undeniably brilliant. Ling set down his utensils, grabbed a tissue, and wiped his mouth before saying lightly, "I'm full too." Nan put down the plastic spoon in her hand, patted her round belly, and echoed Ling's words. Xing Dandan also tried to speak, but a loud hiccup escaped instead. Lindsay Shan leaned close to Xing Dandan's ear. "You don't really have a thing for this Ling, do you?" Xing Dandan gazed at the exceptional and captivating figure ahead, replying with a casual air. "Isn't my interest obvious enough?" Lindsay Shan frowned, retorting. "But he's younger than us, by only 3 or 4 years. Age isn't the problem here. First and foremost, he has to be young." Xing Dandan's eyes shone with a brilliant light as a smirk played on her lips. Lindsay Shan turned her head, studying Xing Dandan intently. "Are you being serious?" she asked. Xing Dandan simply nodded, affirming her stance. "Of course, I'm a firm believer in destiny. I think coming with you to Nushan this time was orchestrated by fate itself, just so I could meet Ling here. This is our destiny." Lindsay Shan's brow furrowed. She and Xing Dandan had been high school classmates and inseparable friends for 4 or 5 years, so they understood each other perfectly. One shouldn't be fooled by Xing Dandan's usually carefree and reckless demeanor. Deep down, she was an incredibly pure person who never fell in love so easily. From their high school days until now, Xing Dandan had never once been in a relationship, a fact that Lindsay Shan found most astonishing. "But you can't forget the immense gap between you," Lindsay Shan stated solemnly. "You're a top-tier student at Dingwuda University, a first-level official martial artist. Ling is merely a high schooler, and judging by his appearance, it's likely that his martial arts qualifications are among the weakest, and his family background isn't impressive either. If you two got together, how would you even manage? Even if your bond is strong enough to endure a few years of long distance, what happens in the future? Without being an official martial artist, he'll graduate and earn a meager salary of 5,000 or 6,000 a month. How will he afford a house? How will he afford a car? Dandan, love isn't just a fleeting passion, it's the slow burn of a lifetime. Furthermore, as your martial arts progress and you eventually become strongest, the chasm between you two will only grow wider and wider. Conflicts will mount daily, accumulating over time until they inevitably erupt one day." Xing Dandan replied with a smile, "The issues you're raising aren't really issues at all. I'm a first-level official martial artist, and I can personally guide Ling's martial arts training. Even if he doesn't make it into Dingwuda University, I can drive to see him every single week. You know my family situation, a house and a car are not problems. And taking 10,000 steps back, even if Ling is destined to be an ordinary person, I'll gladly become one right alongside him. I was never very passionate about martial arts to begin with. If it weren't for my family's pressure and my desire to get into the same university as you, I never would have trained so relentlessly. Honestly, if I could just be a normal person without having to endure martial arts practice every day, you have no idea how happy I'd be. Besides, who says Ling is ordinary?" Xing Dandan shook her head, pointing toward Ling, who was holding Nan's hand ahead of them, and declared proudly, "In my heart, he will always be this handsome and dazzling." Lindsay Shan was utterly stunned. "You're insane. You actually want to abandon the path of martial arts that you have dedicated more than 10 years to, all for a high school student?" Lindsay Shan reached out her hand and touched Xing Dandan's forehead in disbelief. "If your parents ever heard you say this, they would absolutely break your legs." Then she pointed at Ling, exclaiming, "Just look at his frail appearance. He looks like the weakest person here. I don't understand what you see in him." "Hey, it's far too early for you to be worrying like this." Xing Dandan grabbed Lindsay Shan's arm and strode forward. "If you're going to lecture me, let's at least wait." By the time they caught up to Ling, neither Xing Dandan nor Lin Zishan had even seen him, despite him being just 7 or 8 meters ahead. Ling wore a look of utter disbelief. With his current power, a stark contrast to his days as the weakest, he didn't even need to release his mental energy. His enhanced hearing alone was enough to capture their entire conversation with crystal clarity. How outrageous! Ling couldn't help but shake his head. He let out a soft sigh. The little girl nestled in his arms turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "Big brother, what does outrageous mean?" Ling paused for a moment before casually replying, "It's just a special way to praise his sister for being very beautiful." Nana nodded. Thoughtfully, she suddenly spun around, pointed directly at the approaching Xing Dandan and Lin Zishan, and declared at the top of her lungs, "Big brother, those two sisters are incredibly outrageous." Ling was momentarily stunned, before a wide grin spread across his face as he nodded vigorously in agreement. Xing Dandan was completely baffled, having no idea what had just happened, and in her distress, she kept peppering her friend with questions. As she did, Nanan's family came over to check on them. The very next morning, the tour guides began their rounds, knocking on each door. They went from room to room, calling for everyone to get up and assemble downstairs. 30 minutes later, after breakfast, the members of the Senin village tour group gathered by the entrance of the homestay to start their tour. However, the ants in the group began a collective protest about the tour's pace. The young guide looked visibly embarrassed. seeing a small stream nearby, and noting the beautiful surrounding scenery, he simply announced that the entire group would take a 10-minute rest. But before the aunts could even begin to enjoy their break, a panicked voice shouted from the crowd, "They're gone! The family of 3 is gone!" Everyone was shocked. The family of that elegant man, the one who had joined the tour group into the mountains, had vanished. They had simply disappeared. As for when or where it happened, no one had seen a thing. The young tour guide frantically pulled out her mobile phone. But the automated message stating the user you have dialed has powered off coming from the other end sent a wave of panic through her. "Everyone, please help me find them," the young guide pleaded, trying to rally the group into a search party, but she suddenly stopped short. Another realization struck her as someone else from the group yelled out, "A young man is also missing from our group." It was that same elderly man. 3 people had already disappeared. If a few more went missing, her career as a tour guide would be finished. She quickly changed her command, "Everyone, rest in place for 1 hour. I'm going to contact the search and rescue team." After finishing speaking, she ignored the renewed protests from the ants and scrambled to the side to make the urgent phone call. Jing Dandan and Lin Zixin observed the entire chaotic scene unfold. How could 3 people just vanish into thin air like that? "They were right here just a moment ago," Jing Dandan muttered in disbelief. Lin Zixin's brow furrowed. "Yes, far too suddenly. It doesn't make sense. Nanan's family had such a strong presence, it's impossible for them to suddenly fall behind without a single person noticing. Besides, the couple seemed so stable and responsible. If they were truly lost, they would have called the tour guide immediately. This family, with their mysterious origins, is anything but ordinary. It's as if one of them becomes strongest when hidden from sight." "People," Lin Zixin concluded, her expression grave. Jing Dandan, however, shrugged it off. "I don't care if they're ordinary or not, hey you. I realize the tour guide is busy with this search now, right? The rest of our itinerary is probably going to be a complete waste. In that case, let's just go back and find Ling. He had a good connection with Nanan, and he deserves to know this news." "I understand." At Jing Dandan's suggestion, Lin Zixin considered for a moment before nodding in agreement. "That is a sound plan." The two immediately broke away from the main force, retracing their path. Meanwhile, deep within the mountains, Ling strode purposefully towards his objective, the mithril mine. According to the map, the mithril deposit was not far from his current position, merely a few kilometers away. Employing his microstate movement technique, coupled with his formidable spiritual force, Ling became a blur in the landscape. As he passed, the very leaves and trees parted for him. His speed was nothing short of astonishing. After sprinting for roughly 7 or 8 minutes, Ling came to an abrupt halt, a dazzling light blooming in his eyes as his aura pulsed with the power of a man who becomes strongest. He scanned the area before him with a calm indifference. If anyone else had been there to witness the scene, they would have been utterly shocked. Ling then sent ripples of his potent psychic power deep into the ground beneath him, searching for any trace of mithril. After a thorough scan with his mental power, his eyes finally locked onto a specific location, and a faint, confident smile touched his lips as he whispered, "Found it." In the next instant, where his gaze fell, the earth and rock cracked apart and the vegetation exploded, as if an invisible tornado was tearing through the area. The display of raw power was absolutely terrifying, yet Ling wasted no time after confirming his discovery. He immediately focused his mental power, beginning to excavate the mine with incredible speed and precision. His immense spiritual force, far surpassing that of a typical third-level spiritual master, projected from his body and plunged into the earth. The ground suddenly seemed to boil, rumbling violently as if a great earth dragon were stirring from its slumber. An upheaval followed as massive chunks of earth and stone coated in yellow mud were ripped from the ground and sent flying into the air. His mental power then precisely stripped away the dirt, exposing the dense, shimmering silver ore hidden within. Soon, a clod the size of a human head, covered in moist mud, shot out. In midair, the earth disintegrated, revealing a flicker of pure silver. Within a few breaths, 7 or 8 silver nuggets of varying sizes were hovering in front of Ling. The largest was the size of a fist, while the smallest was no bigger than a thumb cap, yet their color was far brighter than ordinary silver, reflecting a faint, prismatic light. Its hardness surpassed that of ordinary steel, a fact Ling proved by effortlessly pressing a clear fingerprint into it, making the metal feel like the weakest clay. As his spiritual energy poured into it, the metal, which was harder than steel, instantly softened, becoming as pliable as dough. "It's truly mithril, there's no doubt," he confirmed. The silver nuggets began to melt under his focused psychic power. At his command, the molten metal reformed into perfect cube-shaped ingots in his hands, into which Ling injected more of his psychic energy. He began to reconfigure them further, knowing that with such precise control over his psychic energy, he could reshape it at will. He could change its form into any figure imaginable. Ling recalled the information Dong Qinghua had given him, mentally verifying each property. He confirmed that the metal in his hand was indeed the legendary secret silver, the same material valued at nearly 100,000 yuan per gram. The amount in his hand was about 4 or 5 caddies, worth more than 200 million. That's no exaggeration, Ling mused to himself. And this is merely the raw ore. To forge it into a true spiritual master's weapon would require dozens of smelting processes. From 4 or 5 caddies of this ore, one would be fortunate to yield a single caddy of purified metal. It all depended on the purity of the mine's mithril. Regardless, this discovery would save Ling a fortune. He had already scanned the entire area with his spiritual power, revealing a dense mithril vein approximately 20 meters long and 4 meters wide. The freshly excavated ore now formed a small mountain, piled high within the forest. On such uneven terrain, if not for Ling's spiritual power holding the mound together, the precious metal would have tumbled and scattered everywhere. Ling's pace was astonishing, easily matching the output of 4 or 5 small excavators working in unison. In a matter of mere hours, he had already carved out roughly 70% of the entire deposit, leaving the main vein a hollowed-out cavern. Only a few scattered fragments remained around the periphery. But then, Ling encountered a new dilemma. How was he going to transport all of this? His initial plan had been modest, to ferry the mithril out in batches using his backpack, digging a little and carrying a little. He'd intended to stop once he had enough to forge a set of spiritual master weapons, but Ling had overlooked one crucial factor, a very human element: greed. He was no exception. It was as if a virtual counter of his wealth was ticking up right before his eyes, skyrocketing with every strike, compelling him to dig with ever-increasing fervor. It seemed he had no choice but to find help for the transportation. There would undoubtedly be complications in moving such a haul, but it couldn't be helped. Worst case, he could always contact Dong Qinghua upon leaving Oxhead Mountain and have her dispatch a team. With his decision made, Ling began to place the mithril ore back into the massive pit he created, refilling it with earth as a temporary concealment. While it was still painfully obvious that the ground had been disturbed, the location's sheer remoteness was a blessing. It was a significant distance from even the most isolated trail in the scenic area. It was highly unlikely anyone would stumble upon it. His map indicated a small ethnic minority village just a few kilometers away. That would be the perfect place to start looking for assistance. The people in such isolated communities were typically simple and honest. A generous payment should be more than enough to secure their help. But if the sight of such treasure made them greedy, if the weakest among them tried to betray him, then he would have to personally ensure they regretted it. Ling thought with chilling certainty. A moment later, he was taken aback by his own coldness and shook his head with a self-deprecating smirk. On the path to where he becomes strongest, why were his thoughts turning so violent and murderous? This was a society of laws. There were countless other ways to handle such problems. Ling shouldered his backpack and began walking toward the target village, following the map's guidance. He clenched his fist, resolving to himself, "I'll start by persuading them peacefully." Meanwhile, Jing Dandan, who was heading back, was abruptly halted by Lindsay Shawn's hushed tone. "What is it?" Jing Dandan asked, turning to look at her with a questioning gaze. Lindsay Shawn's eyes were fixed on a spot in the woods beside the stone path, a peculiar glint flashing in their depths. Lindsay Shawn swiftly darted into the mountain forest, stopping about 7 or 8 meters from the road. She picked something up from the ground and held it out to Jing Dandan. "What do you make of this?" Jing Dandan's eyes widened as she focused on the object, which resembled a red plastic bag, and she suddenly let out a cry. "The ball. It's the little plastic ball Nan Nan was always playing with." Lindsay Shawn gave a grim nod. She had indeed found the red plastic ball that Ling, Jing Dandan, and Nan Nan had been tossing around on the tour bus earlier. Except now, the ball was torn, completely deflated, and abandoned in the undergrowth. If it weren't for Lindsay Shawn's incredibly sharp eyes, they never would have seen it. Without our help, they'd never have found this place. Nanan's ball must have dropped here, and it seems her family simply wandered off on their own. Lyndon surmised they must have left the main group. "We need to move quickly and alert the tour guide and the rescue teams," Jing Dandan urged, bending down to retrieve the ball. But in that instant, a chilling presence washed over them, alerting them to someone nearby. Honing in with their heightened aura, they spotted a tiny spider lurking on the ball just as their hand closed around it. Before they could even flinch, an invisible net of pure psychic energy ensnared them. "What's going on? I'm completely immobilized, as if I'm the weakest one here," Jing Dandan cried out as a monstrous spider materialized from thin air. Then, their eyes caught a figure walking towards them, and beyond the figure, a small, hidden village revealed itself entirely. From a distance, the watching family saw a completely different scene, as if an illusion had been cast. One of their group broke off, sprinting towards the village. Moments later, 4 or 5 men emerged. They strode out from the village gates, heading directly for the little girl's family. As the two groups closed the distance, the young man leading the villagers suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. A look of disbelief washed over his face, quickly replaced by pure, unadulterated joy. He spun around and bellowed, "Big sister has returned. Her family is back with her." The man then took off running. He darted towards an old earthen house, where an elderly man sat quietly in a chair. This was Sen, the village chief, who was diligently carving a piece of wood. As the young man burst into the home, the little girl, Nanan, came dashing in right behind him. She was giggling with excitement, shouting, "Grandpa, I've missed you so much." Without slowing down, she charged straight for the old man and rammed her head directly into his midsection, the impact forcing a spray of blood from his mouth. "Oh, my dear child," the old man wheezed. "Grandpa, have you been doing okay?" Nanan asked, a small bruise already forming on her forehead. The old man, ignoring the searing pain, gently stroked the girl's head and replied, "I am doing just fine." At that moment, Tang Mon and his wife entered, announcing, "Father, we have returned." Tang Malin called out to the old man, his expression a complicated mix of emotions. He remembered the last time he saw his wife's father. Back then, the old man's eyes were sharp, and he possessed the powerful stillness of a resting liger. Now, they were clouded and he appeared to have become the weakest. His entire being seemed to have aged decades. As the couple paid their respects, two young boys came rushing from deeper within the house. "Brother-in-law, sister, what brings you here so unexpectedly?" one of the boys asked. The old man cut in, "They have come to see me. Now, you two head into the mountains and hunt something for the feast. We're going to celebrate tonight." The boys nodded in agreement at their elder's command. The young man beckoned for Nanan to join them, and she was thrilled at the prospect of hunting with her uncles. "Come on, little one, let's go catch some game," the young man offered. The little girl cheered, "Yes, I want to have quail soup, just like the last time I was here." Once they were gone, the old man's demeanor shifted. "Now, tell me what's happened," he said, waving everyone else away. He left only Tang Malin and his wife in the room, then tapped his cigarette holder against the stone steps. The woman's expression grew puzzled, and she glanced at her husband, waiting for him to speak. Tang Malin's eyes widened, and he swallowed hard as he met the old man's gaze. He then began to explain everything. They recounted all the terrible misfortunes they had endured, including the powerful spiritual master who was relentlessly pursuing them. The explanation took a considerable amount of time, and when they finished, the old man let out a small cough. He processed their story. "Level 3? How in the world did you manage to provoke a level 3 spiritual master?" the old man asked, a cold sneer forming. The kind of fool who thinks preying on others is how one becomes strongest. "I knew your arrival spelled trouble, especially after you breached our stockade and spirited Mingwa away. I suspected a day like this would come." A look of shame crossed Tang Man's face as the woman beside him pleaded softly. "Father, I beg you, please help Malin. If not for him, do it for me." Gathering his courage, Tang Man added, "Father, I was told you were attempting to break through to the 3rd rank of spiritual masters. Have you succeeded?" He felt a fresh wave of humiliation to beg his father-in-law for aid, but in the face of such overwhelming power, he felt like the weakest of all. The old man just snorted in response. After a moment of heavy silence, he admitted, "I failed. The attempt left me with hidden injuries and severely damaged my cultivation. Now, all I can do is brace for impact and hope for the best. At my age, I have no hope left of advancing, of reaching the 3rd level in this lifetime. If that 3rd-rank spiritual master truly tracks us to this stockade, you must take your entire family and flee with everyone from the village. I will stay behind and hold him off for as long as I can. You must go and find help from someone else for assistance." His words stunned them. The thought of seeking aid from outsiders had never even crossed their minds. Their entire plan had hinged on the old man's strength. The young man couldn't help but ask, "Father, who could we possibly ask for help? Who would we even look for?" Who to look for? The authorities, of course. The government and the police. The old man's eyes blazed as he grabbed his dry tobacco pipe. He smacked the young man on the head with it and roared, "In a society governed by laws, do you think even a 3rd-rank spiritual master can just go around ending lives in the open street?" The young man offered a timid smile, clutching his head and not daring to utter another word. Tang Malin's expression remained grim. He was all too aware that for someone like Wei Jing, the purple-eyed magic spider, such public displays were hardly a concern. Moreover, the people of this stockade have been isolated in these mountains for far too long. They have absolutely no conception of the immense privilege a 3rd-rank spiritual master commands. Once one becomes strongest in their domain, the law bends. If calling the police was a viable option, he would have done it a long time ago. Just as Tang Man and his group were preparing to leave the earthen house, a figure suddenly rushed inside and began whispering a few urgent words into the young man's ear. After listening intently, the young man turned to Tang Man and said, "The villagers who went out on a hunt have returned. They reported encountering outsiders trespassing on the path." Tang Malin's heart plummeted at the news. Both the old man's and Malin's eyes shot wide, beads of sweat trickling down their faces. Elsewhere, Ling, shouldering a backpack, appeared like a common mountain tourist. He followed a short distance behind a few villagers, observing the settlement ahead with keen curiosity. So, this must be the village indicated on the map. The entire stockade was modest in size, easily taken in with a single glance from higher ground. It consisted of only a dozen or so households, with a total population of no more than 50 villagers. The stockade itself was nestled within a tranquil valley. A crystal-clear stream meandered past the entrance to the village, and it seemed that the faint sound of a waterfall could be heard in the distance. Abruptly, a small blade came hurtling directly at Luing, but he detected the threat with his spiritual sense and sidestepped it with ease. Luing pivoted, his gaze locking onto the direction from which the projectile had been launched. It was a young man clutching another knife in his hand. He glared at Luing, demanding, Who are you? And what is your business here?" As Luing contemplated using his power to pacify the agitated youth, he was interrupted by a voice. It belonged to the little girl, Nan Nan, who had been playing hidden amongst the bushes. She suddenly burst out, shouting, "Big brother!" A little girl cried out, running towards Luing. Big brother, did you come to Grandpa's house to play with Nan Nan?" Luing froze for a second, completely caught off guard to find Shannon's family in a place like this. Moments later, he spotted a group of people approaching. Tang Man, who was part of the crowd, noticed Luing with his large mountaineering bag, and his expression filled with utter astonishment as his heart sank. "So, it's him," he murmured, a soft sigh escaping his lips. He had thought it was Wo Xin who had tracked them down so quickly. "Kid, what are you doing all the way out here?" Tang Man asked, stepping forward to take the lead. Luing rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, explaining, "Well, after your group left, I started feeling better, so I decided to try and catch up. I thought I'd take a shortcut, but I ended up getting completely lost." The surrounding group of people shared a knowing look amongst themselves. It wasn't exactly a rare occurrence for tourists to lose their way in these mountains. Luing was hardly the first soul to wander into their village by accident. After all, their Senin village was merely remote, not completely cut off from the rest of the world. "Brother Tang, what brings you here? Are you lost as well?" Luing asked with genuine curiosity, his gaze steady. Tang Man chuckled warmly. "This is Nanan's grandfather's home. We make a trip back every year to visit family. This time around, we just happened to travel with a tour group." A look of understanding dawned on Lu Xing's face. "Since we've met by such a coincidence, perhaps we could stay together for the night?" Tang Malin's gaze instinctively shifted to a slender old man nearby. The elder's eyes narrowed slightly as he sized Luing up and down before giving a slow nod. "This young man has a very pure look in his eyes. I quite like that." Senin village welcomes such guests. Instantly, smiles bloomed on the faces of Tang Malin and the others. A bronze-skinned youth grinned and spread his arms wide in a welcoming gesture to Luing. "Welcome, outsider, to the real Senin village." Being a friend of Tang Malin's family, and with Sha Nanan being especially fond of him, Luing received a warm reception into the stockade. "You've arrived at the perfect time, just as the eldest sister's family returns. I'll head out later to hunt some wild game myself. I bet a city person like you has never tasted anything like it," the young man with thick eyebrows, large eyes, and a deep tan said, showing great enthusiasm towards Luing. He immediately came over, slinging an arm around Lu Xing's shoulders in a friendly manner. Through their conversation, Luing learned the young man's name was Gu. He was the head of Senin village, the adopted son of the slender old man, and the leader of this tiny village of fewer than 50 people. The old man's name was Jing Sha, and Gu's mother was also the old man's adopted daughter, Gwinga. "This stockade is far from simple," Lu Yuzing thought, watching as Gu and the others' figures vanished swiftly into the forest. He had sensed it the moment he laid eyes on them. Gu was a first-level spiritual master, while the old man, Gu Ping Sha, was at the second level. On top of that, there was Tang Man, the father, who was also a second-level spiritual master. 1, 2, 3. In such a small, secluded village, there were actually 3 spiritual masters. The concentration of power here was just absurd, making him feel like the weakest person around. Lu Xing considered asking if he could hire someone to help transport his mithril, but seeing this display of strength, he was unsure how to even bring it up. Since they were spiritual masters, they would naturally understand the immense value of mithril. On his path to become strongest, he couldn't guarantee that these seemingly simple villagers wouldn't be tempted by such a vast fortune. Besides, Tang Man himself didn't seem simple in the slightest, especially when Luing was contemplating his next move when Sha Nanan scurried over to him, her voice sweet as she said, "Big brother, my ball is missing." Luing paused for a second, then it dawned on him that Sha Nanan was referring to the red plastic ball they had played with. "Where did you last see the ball? Show me where, and I will help you look for it." Luing gently patted Xia Nanan's small head as he spoke. But even as he was talking with Xia Nanan, he detected the auras of 2 individuals. It was the girls from the tour group, Linen and Jing Dandan. He was puzzled as to why they would be here. Just then, Luing sensed several other presences from that same direction. Xia Nanan tilted her head, trying to recall where she had last seen her beloved ball. Suddenly, Xia Nanan's face lit up as she pointed in one direction and jumped with joy. "Nanan's ball is there, Nanan's ball is in that person's hand." Luing's head snapped around. As the scene came into sharp focus, the gentle smile on his face slowly faded. His expression hardened into a cold silence. 2 girls were being held captive, their bodies completely bound in what looked like spiderwebs. Their faces were also covered. A strange man was carrying both girls, who Luing recognized as Lai Zan and Jining Dandan. Dandan struggled to speak, but no sound could escape the bindings covering her face. At that moment, the once lively and cheerful Senlin village fell deathly quiet. Every villager's gaze was locked in a single direction, where they saw. At the entrance of the village, a group of people was slowly advancing. Their leader was a middle-aged man in a plaid suit. His eyes had an unsettling purple glow, and one hand was crushing a shriveled red plastic ball while the other hung casually at his side. Silver, web-like threads extended from the cuff of that very hand. Tang Mun's face turned grim and solemn. The thin old man beside him also set down his smoldering tobacco pipe, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Tang Mun, is this the person you provoked? He's not just some simple rank 3 psychic. He is a peak rank 3 psychic master," the old man declared gravely. The man before them radiated a monstrous aura. The old man instantly shouted, "Malin, take your family and the villagers and get out of here. I will buy you some time." Several long, narrow streams of golden aura shot out from a distance, flying in an instant directly at the man in the strange suit. Wei Jing seemed entirely unbothered, as a single silver thread suddenly shot out from his cuff, striking the golden auras with immense force. Purple threads and golden shadows intertwined in midair, their speed so dazzling that no one could see the exchange clearly. They could only hear the sharp clang of what sounded like colliding swords. It didn't take long for the narrow golden shadow to be knocked from the air, swatted aside by the silver thread. At almost the exact same moment, the thin old man standing beside Tang Mun groaned in the distance, the light in his eyes dimming rapidly. Only then could everyone see clearly that the golden shadow that had been fighting the silver threads was actually a dry tobacco pipe, but it had been shattered into several pieces. "Is this what you were relying on, Tang Mun?" Wei Jing spoke softly, then took a single step forward and appeared in the open space at the village gate in the blink of an eye. It was like teleportation. "I thought there might be a challenge, but it turns out you brought me just the weakest old man. A waste of a man. With his vain second-level spiritual power and his crude skills, he brings nothing but humiliation to the title of Spiritual Master," Wei Jing said with disappointment. "Fine. This time, I will show you how one becomes strongest by crushing all of your hopes to dust. Let me give you a taste of true despair," Wei Jing declared, unleashing his psychic energy to envelop Tang Monk completely. Tang Monk's face turned ashen as he snorted coldly. "Wei Jing, you've gone too far." As he spoke, he raised his hand to form a seal. A hand sign materialized, and suddenly, psychic energy erupted from his body. With a powerful shudder, a vast number of small, black, and brown iron beads shot from his sleeves, so densely packed they formed a net hurtling towards Wei Jing, who didn't even deign to look. He simply extended a hand towards the incoming assault. The silver threads that had bound the villagers instantly retracted, then flew out from his cuffs to intercept the clusters of iron beads. The two forces collided with a series of sharp, crisp sounds. The iron beads were deflected and shattered. In a mere instant, every single one had fallen to the ground, broken into pieces by Wei Jing's power. Witnessing Wei Jing's sheer, overwhelming power, Tang Monk's face went deathly pale as beads of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He staggered backward, step by agonizing step. "My secret iron ball cannon, it was useless. In this moment, I am the weakest." Tang Monk muttered in disbelief. Wei Jing casually caught a shattered iron ball, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "How dare you even attempt to compete with me?" Using such a pathetic technique, he sneered, his smile turning malevolent as he released shimmering mithril cobwebs from his palms. "You truly don't comprehend the chasm between heaven and earth, yet you dare to challenge me?" Wei Jing scoffed as the cobweb instantly ensnared everyone present, immobilizing them completely. It even wrapped around the small girl, Shan, binding her tightly. With immense effort, Tang Monk turned his head and ground out through clenched teeth. "Wei Jing, you damn monster. Direct your attacks at me. What kind of coward bullies a little girl?" Tang Monk was utterly furious, his eyes turning bloodshot with rage. Wei Jing simply let out a sinister laugh. Still so stubborn, even at death's door, he mocked. Wei Jing flicked his hand, manipulating the cobwebs, trapping them all. The threads instantly tightened around Malin and Lindsay Shan, constricting tightly around their necks. Wei Jing then gestured towards the two girls, saying, "Originally, my plan was just to eliminate these two students and frame you for it, but I never expected to find a place so perfectly secluded. This is perfect," Wei Jing mused. "Now, I can take my sweet time." A wicked thought crossed his mind. "I'll enjoy myself as I take care of all of you." His gaze fell upon Shan, who trembled with fear. "Don't you worry. Your daughter will make for an exquisite vessel. I'll even save you a taste of the final product." After speaking, he cackled with pure malice. Tang Monk's eyes shot wide open. He hadn't realized Wei Jing practiced such a vile art. This must be how he becomes strongest. Is that forbidden technique? The one that uses living souls as conduits? He whispered subconsciously. Tang Monk knew all too well the horrific fate that awaited the victim of such an evil technique. His fury boiled over, his eyes blazing red, and he struggled with all his might to break free from the trap. But Wei Jing's cobwebs were impossibly strong. Wei Jing let out another chilling laugh, his snake-like tongue flicking out. "Yes, this is it. This is the absolute despair I wanted to see on your face for daring to oppose me," Wei Jing hissed. Meanwhile, Lindsay Shan was frozen in shock and terror. Her face was ashen, her mind completely blank. "It's over," she thought. "I'm going to lose my life here on Yodo Mountain. How could I be so unlucky to be caught in this deadly mess for no reason?" Lindsay Shan felt utterly desolate, like the weakest creature in the world. A deep regret for her decision to come to Nan for a relaxing trip filled her heart. A spiritual master? This terrifying man is more like a devil incarnate. The figure before her was none other than the legendary spiritual teacher. In the distance, Jing Danan's eyes also flew wide open. Her lips trembled as she breathed a single name, Luing. Meanwhile, the smile on Wei Jing's face bloomed ever more brilliantly, yet his eyes grew increasingly cold. That chilling gaze made her think one final thought. "I hope we can meet again in the next life." Wu Xian, with a disturbingly relaxed expression, casually instructed the men behind him. "Finish off Tang Malin's wife first, grab his daughter, and then deal with the rest." The two imposing men in suits released Jing Dandan and the other from their grasp. On Wu Xian's command, the two henchmen moved toward the little girl, instantly closing in on Zan, who was still paralyzed with fear. At that very moment, the mystical spiderweb holding Zan in place was torn apart in an instant. Wei Jing, who believed he held absolute superiority in this situation, was left completely baffled. He never imagined that someone could possibly shatter his mystical web. "How did my mystical spider web break?" Wei Jing questioned, knowing the web can only be perceived through psychic power. It was Ling who had ripped it apart using nothing but his raw, bodily strength. Zan, who had been trapped, now clung tightly to Ling's arm. I can move again. Big brother, please, you have to save Mom and Dad, cried Zan. At this time, the two powerful men had already reached them. Get out of the way and let us take her. The two brawny men spoke with pure arrogance. Ling casually delivered a punch to each of their stomachs, sending their bodies flying backward through the air. All they could do was let out cries of pure agony. As Wei Jing was still processing his broken spider webs, a sharp sound pierced the air like a cannonball. He whipped his head around, his pupils contracting in shock. In the next second, he saw two burly bodies reflected in his eyes, flying toward him like broken sacks, rapidly growing larger. They slammed into the ground more than 10 meters away, two tattered and bloody heaps. These were the same brawny men in suits who had just been sent by Wu Xian to take care of Tang Malin's family. Now, however, there was a deep fist-shaped mark on their chests and abdomens that had nearly punched straight through their bodies. Everyone looked on, dazed and confused. It was truly impossible to connect the devastating power they had just witnessed with the thin, handsome young man standing before them. He appeared to be just an ordinary, gentle young man, perhaps looking like the weakest one here. What just happened? Wei Jing muttered. A level 5 warrior? Wei Jing stared at Ling, his face contorted in shock. No, it's not a level 5 warrior. There is no visible astral chi and no trace of internal energy. Wei Jing quickly denied his own guess, gritting his teeth and demanding. So, how did you do it? Was it you who just shattered my mystical spider silk? Tang Malin? Is this your real support? Wu Xin glanced at Tang Malin, who simply looked back blankly, completely failing to understand Wu Xin's accusation. Forget it. It doesn't matter, Wu Xin scoffed, taking a deep breath to regain his composure as a strange light flickered in his purple eyes. He began to advance step by step. Without a protective aura, you are just a peculiar boy. Under my dense silver spider silk, your fragile, weakest body will be sliced apart like butter. I can't wait to hear you howl in pain. Wei Jing licked his lips, his expression becoming increasingly twisted. But for the man who eventually becomes strongest, Ling's eyes remained as calm as water as he quietly regarded his opponent with indifference. You are welcome to try, Ling stated calmly. Xian spoke casually, a grimace pulling back his lips to reveal blood-red gums. Let's see if you can maintain that arrogance in the face of death. In the very next moment, a menacing purple light flared in his eyes as his body erupted with nearly 100 silver threads, a number that was double what he had previously shown. The massive silver threads sliced through the air, converging on Ling with lethal speed. To any outside observer, the man in the suit resembled a spider demon from urban folklore, ready to ensnare and devour his prey. But in the next second, that predatory smile froze solid on his face. Confronted by a storm of spider silks that moved faster than the naked eye could follow, Ling performed a single, simple gesture. He calmly extended his right hand. His fair, slender palm moved gently in the sunlight, tracing a pattern that seemed to follow some profound, unseen law. It was as if his palm harbored a miniature black hole, a vortex that rendered the attack into the weakest of gestures. The deadly silver threads were drawn in, irresistibly pulled by the vortex until they were all neatly gathered in Ling's grasp. Far away, Linden, who saw this entire exchange with her own eyes, suddenly shuddered as if struck by lightning. Her lips trembled uncontrollably as she whispered, "Control level. That's a control level martial art." What did control mean? It meant that between one's palms, all things could be dominated. Lin Zixin had only heard a professor mention it once during a lecture at Ding Wuhan University. To witness it now, with her own eyes, was to see the very moment someone becomes strongest. That legendary concept slammed into her mind with undeniable force. It was as if a myth, a mere legend, had suddenly sprung to life right before her. How could Lin Zixin not tremble with overwhelming excitement? In the distance, Wei Jin let out a cry so warped by shock it was barely human. How is this possible? His eyes bulged, utterly filled with disbelief. The might of a spiritual master was supposed to transcend that of ordinary warriors. Wei Jin frantically pushed his mental power, but it felt like pushing against an immovable mountain. His greatest efforts felt like the weakest of shoves, and it was completely useless. Impossible. This is impossible. Wei Jin stammered, his eyes becoming a crazed web of bloodshot veins, and the once strange purple of his irises turned utterly terrifying. On the other side, Luing's fair hand slowly tightened its grip, his 5 fingers closing. Luing stared with cold indifference at the man in the suit. With a simple tug on the threads in his hand, he asked fiercely, "Have you finished your monologue?" In the distance, Wei Jin let out a choked cry, like a marionette whose strings had been violently yanked. He was pulled airborne, flailing helplessly as he flew towards Luing. How can he control my mithril spider web? Was the only confused thought Wei Jin could form. Suddenly, his flight stopped. His eyes locked onto Luing, a desperate madness igniting within them. If this is how it ends, Wei Jin snarled, then we'll all die together. As he spoke, a terrifying spiritual force, far surpassing anything he had shown before, erupted from his body. Invisible ripples of power began to distort the very air. Ginga's expression twisted in horror as he yelled out a frantic warning. This is bad. He's going to detonate his mental core. If you're too close, your mind will be shattered. After shouting his warning, he gritted his teeth and dashed towards the location of the beautiful woman and the young girl. The others quickly followed his lead. Lin Zixin, injured, did her best to drag her body away from the blast zone. But then, her face pale with fear, she screamed, "Luing! What about Luing?" Everyone on the battlefield felt their hearts seize, as if a massive stone had been dropped onto their chests, crushing them with an indescribable dread. A wave of discomfort washed over them. In an instant, everyone reacted, scrambling back in a frantic retreat, yet Luing, at the very epicenter, remained perfectly still. His gaze was fixed on the approaching middle-aged man, whose suit was as twisted as his distorted features. A profound sense of pity flickered across Luing's face. "I must admit, your mental power is among the weakest I've ever encountered. It's truly pitiful." Luing's words were spoken softly, but in the very next second, the contorted smile on the man's face froze solid, a mask of disbelief. Before the eyes of every stunned onlooker, a brilliant golden sun began to rise, dwarfing the actual afternoon sun filtering through the valley gaps and casting its light upon the small village. It was as if Luing himself had transformed into a radiant star, unleashing an endless torrent of golden light. This wasn't a mere visual spectacle, it was an assault on a spiritual level, and under this near-infinite golden radiance, the man's psychic assault evaporated like snow under a blazing sun. Luing's dark eyes now burned with a ferocious golden fire. The young man, once just fair and handsome, now radiated a noble and mysterious aura that commanded awe. In a single moment, the attacker's power was submerged, extinguished, melted, and finally, vanished into absolute nothingness. The man collapsed to the ground, utterly powerless. His pupils dilated rapidly, his face a canvas of pure shock and unbelievable horror. Wei Jing coughed up a spray of blood as he fell to his knees, his body swaying. I am Wei Jing. How could I possibly die?" With his last breath, he announced his name to Luing, as if it held some great significance. It was a pity Luing wasn't in a charitable mood. Having already perfected his spear techniques and now blessed with overwhelming spiritual power, a mere name meant nothing to him. Luing casually turned his attention from the fallen man. "This thing is quite interesting," he remarked, looking at the silver thread spider silk on the ground. In his hands, the silk seemed to come alive. As Luing began to manipulate the web in his palm, all the people who had been ensnared were instantly freed. "Made from mithril," he noted. "It'll have to do for now." Although Luing wasn't fond of flexible spiritual weapons like silver wire, he knew that if twisted into a spear-like shape, it could still serve a purpose until his endless knife wheel was complete. At his level of spiritual power, few weapons could withstand his full might anyway. Sha Nanat approached Luing cautiously, her voice soft. "Big brother, you're incredible. Thank you for saving." Luing could only offer a gentle smile in response. If the martial prowess Luing had displayed earlier was like dropping a bomb on the crowd, shocking them to their core, then the reveal of his spiritual power was nothing short of a nuclear detonation. It completely wiped their minds clean, leaving only a state of blank incomprehension. Luing is a spiritual master? But how old is he? He looks no older than a high school student, perhaps 17 or 18, yet he possesses a martial cultivation comparable to a 5th-level martial artist. His mastery of martial arts alone was monstrous enough. But now, they had to add the title of spiritual master to his list of terrifying attributes. And not just any master, but one who could effortlessly crush a 3rd-level spiritual teacher like Wei Jing. Lindsay Shan's eyes were wide as saucers, nearly bulging from their sockets. Beside her, Jing Dandan's jaw hung open, his face a mask of utter shock and bewilderment. That dazzling, majestic, and utterly terrifying spiritual power was like a scorching sun, undeniable and absolute. A power so immense it could instantly snuff out the self-destructive blast of Wu Xian's spirit. This was a being that shattered their entire understanding of the world. The very concepts of genius and monster were utterly smashed to pieces, and they knew they were witnessing the moment a boy becomes strongest of all. The most stunned of all were Lindsay Shan and Jing Dandan, both of whom were considered top-tier students at Ding Wuhan University. Tang Maolin remained locked in a forward stance, utterly frozen with a vacant look on his face, as were the others. He parted his lips, but found himself at a loss for words, unsure how to even address Luing. Luing simply strode forward, placing a reassuring hand on Tang Maolin's shoulder, grounding the man's scattered senses. "Brother Tang, there's no need for thanks. I merely dealt with a villain who preyed on the weakest, but there is a small matter that I believe you can assist me with," Luing finished. Tang Maolin finally snapped back to reality, nodding with grave sincerity. "Of course, anything." To sidestep any further complications with the group, Luing stayed a single night before catching the very first bus out of the Oxhead Mountain scenic area the following morning. Unsurprisingly, Lindsay Shan and Jing Dandan tagged along. The bus rumbled down the winding mountain road as the nascent morning sun streamed through the window, casting a golden hue upon Luing's sharp profile. Luing's gaze was fixed on the blur of scenery outside, his mind quietly calculating his next move. He had already entrusted all the affairs of the mithril mine to Tang Maolin's capable hands. As an official 2nd-level spiritual teacher who had passed the formal assessment, he had access to exclusive channels for liquidating such a large quantity of mithril ore. He had promised to sell the mithril as swiftly as possible and transfer the full proceeds directly to Luing's account, a small token to repay the immense life-saving debt he owed. Luing had no fear of Tang Maolin betraying his trust. All in all, the new Tushan excursion was a resounding success. But beyond completing his task, Luing had also acquired an unexpected prize. A mithril-grade spiritual weapon. The hundreds of spider threads he claimed were spun from pure mithril. Luing had already weighed them, totaling around 4 to 5 pounds. It was a stark reminder of how much easier it was for a spiritual teacher to accumulate wealth compared to an ordinary warrior. Wu Jing was a mere third-level practitioner, yet even he could afford a mithril-grade weapon and had two fourth-level warriors as minions. But it all came down to true ability. On the path to becoming the strongest, such pawns were meaningless. Ling mused silently, lost in his own thoughts. To his left, both Jing Dandan and Lindsay Shan were stealing glances at him, though one was far less subtle. Jing Dandan, in particular, made no effort to hide her fascination with Luing. She stared at his profile, wondering what thoughts occupied the mind of such a man. Luing, where are you headed next? Jing Dandan's voice suddenly cut through the silence. As Luing turned, the sun framed him from behind, bathing his silhouette in a soft, golden aura. He considered for a moment before replying, Lianqing, I have some business to attend to there. Dong Qinghua had informed him that the Ding Province Spiritualist Association was headquartered in Lianqing, the only place he could go to take the official spiritual teacher assessment. Lianqing, that's our home, Jing Dandan exclaimed, her face lighting up with genuine surprise. We can all travel back together. Luing cast a skeptical glance at the pair. Aren't you two students at Dingwu University? That's in the provincial capital. Why would you be heading to Lianqing? Jing Dandan paused, momentarily flustered and at a loss for an excuse. Lindsay Shan shot her a helpless look before smoothly stepping into cover for her friend. Dandan's family is from Lianqing. She mentioned before we came to New Tushan that she was planning to visit home on this trip. That's right, I was just going to visit my family, Jing Dandan chimed in a little too quickly. I see, Luing nodded with a slight smile. In that case, let's travel together. I'm completely unfamiliar with Lianqing, so I could use your guidance. You can stay at my house, Jing Dandan offered immediately, her eyes sparkling. Her surprise was evident, her pretty face lighting up as if she'd been granted a great favor, and Luing found he didn't mind Jing Dandan's company at all. He recalled how during Wei Jin's prior attack, Jing Dandan, though caught by the enemy, had urged him to escape quickly. That kind of selflessness was a rare quality, and besides, Jing Dandan was undeniably attractive. Among all the women Luing had ever met, only Dong Qinsha surpassed her in beauty, not counting young girls like Sain Yang, of course. It was just that Jing Dandan's personality was a bit brazen and her style was overly flashy. Perhaps her weakest trait was this tendency towards ostentation, which Luing wasn't fond of. What am I even thinking? Could I actually be developing feelings for her? Luing shook his head with a wry smile, banishing the thought from his mind. Dismissing his inner reflections, he turned his gaze back to the window just as his phone began to ring. Luing answered, and a cold voice spoke. Luing, it's Dong Qing. Luing was momentarily taken aback before replying, Hello, Instructor Dong. What can I do for you? Dong Qing's words were sharp and direct. The selection of chiming generals has been moved up. Where are you now? I'm coming to pick you up immediately. The chiming general star selection, the very crucible where one proves they can become the strongest, was happening sooner than expected. Luing was surprised but simply complied, reporting his location in Zoming City. All right, I'll be there in approximately 15 minutes. Be ready. Dong Qing promptly ended the call. Luing lowered his phone, his eyes glinting with contemplation. The chiming star selection was ahead of schedule. Judging by Dong Qing's urgent tone, it seemed the event was imminent. If that was the case, his spiritual teacher assessment would likely have to be postponed. A short while later, the bus pulled into the leaning bus station. Luing, is something wrong? Do you have a friend coming for you? Jing Dandan asked, looking at him with a hint of suspicion. A bad feeling stirred in her heart. Luing nodded, his tone apologetic. Yeah, something important has come up. I'm afraid I won't be able to go to Leaning for now. A look of pure disappointment washed over Jing Dandan's face. She quickly composed herself, however, and offered, Where are you headed? I can have someone give you a ride. No, that's all right, Luing said, shaking his head. My friend will be here any minute. Okay then. But before Jing Dandan could say more, a sudden, powerful noise cut through the air. The platform was bustling with people, but the deafening roar of an engine, growing louder as it approached, silenced the chatter. It echoed through the street, causing countless people to crane their necks in curiosity. They watched as a sleek, green supercar blazed towards them from the distance. Is that the Oasis killer from the Lion Country? That car has to be worth over 10 million, a passenger exclaimed in awe. In the next instant, the very same 10 million plus supercar screeched to a halt directly in front of the bus stop. It kicked up a cloud of dust and exhaust, forcing passersby to scramble out of the way, their intimidation silencing any potential complaints. The supercar's doors swung upwards, and two figures emerged. A young man and a woman, both impeccably dressed with the unmistakable air of the fabulously wealthy. Dandan, the girl, adorned with large earrings and heavy makeup, shouted. She rushed toward Jing Dandan with excitement. Anu, you got here so fast. Jing Dandan replied, as the young man in the driver's seat waved. Dandan, long time no see. You've gotten even more beautiful, the young man said, his words dripping with flirtatious intent. His eyes then shifted to Luing. Is this your friend? Aren't you going to introduce us? What are you doing here? Jing Dandan asked, pulling her hand away from the girl named On Yu. She shot the yellow-haired youth a look of clear annoyance, her expression turning sour. Lindsay Shan didn't seem to care for him, but she introduced herself anyway. This is Lindsay Shan, my best friend from Dinghu, a second-level warrior. When it was time to introduce Luing, Jing Dandan found herself at a loss for words. Honestly, she knew nothing of Luing's background or anything substantial, and the mysterious, dazzling aura surrounding him couldn't possibly be explained in just 1 or 2 sentences. This is Luing, a good friend I met during my travels. Xing Dandan deliberately emphasized the term good friend. Unfortunately, the girl with the large earrings and the yellow-haired youth paid her emphasis no mind, as they were completely focused on Lindsay Shan, the second-level martial artist. That's amazing. In a world where everyone wants to become strongest that's truly impressive. Hello, I'm also a good friend of Dandan's. My name is Sue. The girl with the large earrings eagerly extended her right hand toward Lindsay Shan, her voice filled with enthusiasm. The yellow-haired young man's eyes lit up the moment he heard Lindsay Shan was a second-level martial artist at Dongga University, and he quickly introduced himself. My name is Chao Minglin. Since you're Dandan's friend, then you're our friend from now on. As for Luing, who they instantly dismissed as the weakest of the group, they gave him a single glance and promptly ignored him. Luing, however, didn't seem to care as he looked down at his watch. Dong Qinghua had said she would arrive in about 15 minutes, and that time was nearly up. After Xing Dandan chatted for a few moments, Chao Minglin, the yellow-haired youth, spoke up. All right, let's head back to Lining Qing and catch up properly. He pulled out a key fob, unlocking the doors of a sleek sports car with a proud smile. I just picked up this Oasis killer a week ago, and it just so happens to be a 4-seater. What a coincidence, right? It's almost as if the car knew I'd be picking up 2 beautiful ladies today. Xing Dandan's brow furrowed as she stared at the supercar's rear. There were only 2 seats back there. Where was Luing supposed to sit? Sue's eyes widened in surprise, and she didn't bother hiding her feelings from Luing. She asked directly, Dandan, you're not actually planning to bring him along, are you? Xing Dandan nodded and said, Luing, where are you headed? We can drop you off first. No need, I already told my friend to come pick me up. Luing politely declined. What's the big deal, Dandan? He's just some tag-along. Why are you taking him so seriously? Are you saying even Lindsay Shan has to give up her seat for him? So what if he's handsome? You can find guys that look like him anywhere, Sue stated bluntly. Chao Minglin was also clearly displeased. That's right. Didn't he just say he has a friend coming to get him? So just let him wait for his friend and they can take the bus together. With that, Chao Minglin pulled a thick wad of cash from his pocket, tossed it on the ground in front of Luing, and said dismissively, this should be more than enough for you to take a taxi to Lining. In Chao Minglin's mind, the so-called friends of a high schooler could only afford to travel by bus or taxi. Xing Dandan was so furious and flustered that for a moment she was utterly speechless. Luing simply stared at the cash Chao Minglin had scattered on the ground, a peculiar look in his eyes. Just then, a deep, rumbling sound of propellers echoed from directly above their heads. The noise was immense, accompanied by a powerful gust of wind that sent the scattered banknotes fluttering across the ground. At the adjacent bus stop, bystanders waiting for their ride all looked up toward the sky in astonishment. The group looked up in surprise as well, only to see a massive black helicopter hovering at a height of more than 10 meters above the bus station, positioned right over them. The 4 characters for the Eastern Military Region were also written on the helicopter's fuselage, while a beautiful and formidable officer stood in a dark blue uniform. Positioned by the open door, she leaned out halfway and dropped a long rope ladder from above. Luing, hurry up, we're on a tight schedule, Dong Qingu called out. Luing shouted a greeting to Dong Qingu, then turned with a smile toward the bewildered Xing Dandan, Lindsay, and Shan Su. Chao Minglang was equally confused as Luing said, my ride is here to pick me up. I'll be going first. See you all next time. After speaking, he instantly vanished from their sight. It was a glimpse of how one goes from being the weakest and becomes strongest, as Luing leaped, his entire body becoming a blur of smoke as he swiftly climbed the helicopter's cable ladder. Everyone present was completely stunned by what had just transpired. They simply could not believe what their eyes were seeing. Just before the door of the massive helicopter closed, Luing waved at them one last time. The door of the colossal black helicopter sealed shut, and its rotors kicked up one final gust of wind, creating several small tornadoes on the street below as it quickly departed, leaving a group of people standing at the bus stop in utter astonishment. Many of them quickly pulled out their phones to take pictures. The people who had been feeling quite jealous of Luing just moments before were now completely thunderstruck, their mouths agape. Their jaws were hanging so wide they could have almost fit a fist inside. Also, did you see his movements on the helicopter just now? No ordinary martial artist could pull that off. My goodness, this person must be one of those legendary street experts, the people murmured. The crowd was left with a profound sense of the mystery and terrifying power of this world, and they completely forgot about waiting for the bus. They simply hailed a taxi and left. At that moment, Chia Mingle Yang and Su W also wore expressions of complete disbelief. It was a long time before they finally recovered from their deep state of shock. Dandan, your high school friend, what in the world is his background? Chao Minglang recalled the military helicopter that had just thundered away. Then his gaze fell on his own supercar, an Oasis killer he once thought was the peak of performance. Now, however, it seemed like the weakest of toys. In contrast, Xing Dandan and Lin Zishan were far more composed, as they had already witnessed the true extent of Luing's strength, making it no surprise that such power was accompanied by a mysterious and formidable background. Xing Dan and cast an indifferent glance toward Xiao Minglang before turning away. She took Lin Zishan's arm and said, "Zishan, I think we should just take the high-speed train back to Lanqing." Lin Zishan startled for a moment, then nodded her head quickly. "That's a good idea." After speaking, the two of them completely disregarded Xiao Minglang, whose face was flushed with embarrassment, and turned around. With that, they left the bus station. Xiao Minglang looked utterly dejected as he watched them depart, while the helicopter continued its flight over Lanqing City on its course to the Eastern Military District. Inside, Luing was seated, looking out through the window. The vast city below shrank rapidly, appearing like a miniature town constructed from Lego toys. It was not the first time that Luing had flown in a plane, but this was his first experience in a helicopter, and a strange new sensation stirred in his heart. Seeing his expression, Dong Qinghua asked, "Do you like it? If so, join our Eastern Military Region and I'll see to it you get one." Luing then opened his mouth, a smile forming. "It's a beautiful thing to imagine." Dong Qinghua replied speechlessly. "What I mean is, you could be riding in one every single day. When you get promoted to Grandmaster and become a Major General in the military region, the military will provide one for you." Beside him, Chin Xe Jun patted Luing's shoulder and said in a half-joking manner,